And yes, to all the folks that are asking right out of the gates, this session will be recorded and will be shared afterwards. And today we're really excited to share our website so that we can know where you can get all the centralized information that we've been collecting over the course of our workshops, and it will land on one website, and we're happy to share that. So as you're joining, and we are a fairly large group, we'd just love to see who's in the audience this afternoon. So as you're joining us, please just feel free to just put who you are and where you're joining us from in the chat box so that we can start to see who's in the audience this afternoon. And again, we just request for your patience as we'll start very shortly as we allow folks to come into the room and give people some time to settle in. But good afternoon, everyone, for joining. Good afternoon, everyone. There we go. Okay, we'll just give it a few more minutes, as I know these events are often lags on time, but we want to make sure we give everyone enough time to just settle in and join us for this afternoon. First, a community of practice for collecting social identity data, and what we've been coining our initiative, Data for Change. So thank you so much for those of you who are joining in. We do have a fairly large number of people registering, so we want to make sure that we give our back-end administrator here that is managing all of these requests coming in.
Good, Alana, how are you doing? I'm just on an external training, but it's okay. They won't
Awesome. And as you are joining us, please make sure you're muted so that we are hearing folks and the presenter and not your side conversations. Thank you. So I'm seeing wonderful organizations coming through, to great data roles coming in. That's always interesting to watch as we see people's roles, EDI managers and evaluators. And so that's always great to see folks who's in the room. So as you're joining us, feel free to just scroll in the chat. Lots of our colleagues in the sector are joining, and that's really great to see. And we're just going to join and then give it one more minute as we have just a few more people joining in as always. So that's great. So thank you so much. And can I just ask my colleagues who are here, is my image, am I coming in clear or does it look fuzzy?
You're clear.
Okay.
You're clear. Yeah.
Okay, then it must be my contacts. So I'm coming out a little, feel like it's fuzzy, but what am I going to do at this point, eh? With change my camera. Thank you so much. This is great. We have City of Toronto in the house. We have lots of great folks in the house. York Region. And I'm getting compliments along the way. Thank you. I look great. I just feel like I'm fuzzy, like my contacts are not clear. Thank you, Sophie. All right. So I promise you we'd start, and let's start. So 1:35, I'm going to hand it over just and ask for our PowerPoint to get up and going. So Nora, if you want to work your magic there. And as folks are going to continue to join this afternoon, and we'll just have to request for your patience, as I'm probably sure the admit button will come popping up. But as promised, we do record these sessions. And if you or your colleagues have missed this session and want to revisit, we'll make sure it's available. And we're really excited to share the website with you this afternoon and share how to navigate the recordings and all those places. And so without further ado, I'm going to ask for our colleagues who is leading this session today from Cassa to maybe just start us off with agenda setting and some land acknowledgement. And I'll be back soon.
Thanks, Kosel. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Naini Nandakumar. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the manager of community development here at the Council of Agencies Serving South Asians. And I support the organization through grant writing, community partnerships, stakeholder engagement, and operational planning. I'm going to quickly pass it over to my other colleague, and then we'll dive into the land acknowledgement before going into our topics for today's discussion.
Thanks, Naini. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kuratulan, and I'm the Executive Assistant and Membership Coordinator at the Council of Agencies Serving South Asian, and I'm also the Administrative Assistant at Toronto Nonprofit Network. I'm here to organize and support the Data for Change Community of Practice session with Naini Nandakumar. I will pass it back to Naini.
Thanks, Kurit. So the work of CASA takes place on traditional Indigenous territories of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. This territory is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. This territory is also covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. Today, Takaranto, the traditional Mohawk name of this area called Toronto, which means trees in the water, and its surrounding areas are still home to Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to meet, work, and play on this territory as settlers. And sorry, Nora, can you just switch the slide to our land acknowledgement slide? Next slide. Yes, thank you so much, Nora. We wish to express gratitude to Mother Earth for the resources we are using and honor all the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people who have been living on the land since time immemorial. Acknowledging the history and contributions of Indigenous peoples must be meaningfully connected to our collective responsibility to advance truth and reconciliation in our communities. Understanding Canada's colonial history and its ongoing impact on Indigenous communities is essential. We encourage everyone to continue learning and to actively engage in actions that support equity, justice, and reconciliation. So I guess I'll pass it back to Kosel if you want to go over the Data for Change project. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Naini. Just next slide, please. There we are. So just a reminder, and I do this at all of our sessions, is just to share the objective of why we're gathered today. And if I could just get them the slide after that. Before that, sorry, before that. Yeah. So the objective of the day and the objective of our social identity data collection is really to work across the sectors and to convene across sectors, as many of you are coming to us from various capacities and different organizations. And it's to how to best support our sector to begin to think about how to collect social identity data. And that being the main objective. We know that other sectors do this and have been doing this for a really long time, but our sector has been doing it in a very fragmented, individually organized method and systems. And so we're looking to better improve how we do this collectively as a sector. And that's really the main objective of this project. Using and overall using the data to better evidence our equity deserving communities that we all serve in some form of capacity. And so the better our methodology, our systems and tool sharings that we have across the sector, the better that we hope that we can collectively begin to share our shared story about the communities that we serve. And ultimately, the third and most important thing is that we're all looking for resources and methodology of how to do this work better. And so the more that we provide these capacity building sessions is the hopes that you all can tap into the resources and tools that we'll share across the sector so that we can all be doing this together. So through our various iterations of our project, this project in this phase is looking at bringing in 3 partners together, where Find Help 211 is the convener of this project and is hosting this project from various capacities. And we have brought in 3 really great community partners to help host, share knowledge, and bring resources to the community. CASA today is our lead agency that will be supporting us with the community of practice. But if you joined us in previous sessions, you know that SHIP has been supporting also the capacity building learning sessions along with logical outcomes that's been sharing the technical tools, know-how, and thinking through the methodology of collecting social identity data. The 4 of all of us and the 4 of us as agencies, as separate partners, are coming together to share with you a full set of community learning and knowledge mobilization. So the next slide, please. So as the workshops are structured throughout the whole year, so it's not just a one-time engagement opportunity, but really a year-long capacity building learning opportunity. We have just completed, and the design of our sessions are based on how we would build out a community data data collection methodology. So stage 1, you would plan and build. Stage 2, you would collect and store. Stage 3, we would talk about analyzing, interpreting. And stage 4, we would talk about share and learn. These are meant to be throughout the year. So again, we've just completed and launched in April, May. We're wrapping up with the community of practice, and then you'll see the segment of partners and workshop opportunities kind of in the same manners and in the same rhythm, but throughout the year all the way up to December. So we really hope that this is our first community of practice, and it will be a little bit more of a really for members here in this group of how to really dictate, how we want to do this as a group, what are the kind of key learnings we want to do, and really open it for the sector. So I'm going to hand it back to Cassa to start helping us think, and all of us as a group here today, just to kind of formulate a bit more what the community of practice really means as we think about the full year engagement, set the tone, set our own parameters as a learning group, and really, hand it over to us as a full sector to talk about and discuss. So, Nayani Korat, can I ask you to lead that part of the discussion?
Yeah, of course. Next slide, please. Noor? Yeah, this one. I'm just going to go a bit over what CASA does as an organization before talking about our role in the Data for Change project. So a little bit about CASA and what we do as an organization. We're an umbrella organization of over 120 member agencies dedicated to empowering South Asians, racialized and other marginalized communities. We support the social, economic, and political and cultural empowerment of community members through training, research, leadership, and capacity building. So our goal is to pretty much advocate for systemic change through coalition building with organizations across Ontario, British Columbia, Alberta, and Quebec, in order to equip these communities with the tools, skills, and knowledge necessary to fully participate in all aspects of Canadian society. Next slide, please. So in the last few years, CASA has been working on its national expansion phase. So where we initially we were only serving South Asian and racialized communities in Ontario, we're now we've been able to serve communities, South Asian and racialized communities in British Columbia, Alberta, and Quebec through funding that we were able to receive. And we're doing more of this collective advocacy work in these provinces and also promoting CASA's services and program delivery nationwide. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Kurit. She's going to go over the membership piece.
Thanks, Naini. So as Naini said, CASA is an umbrella organization. It means that we don't provide frontline services, but we have over 120 members. That includes organizations, individuals, and institutions that offer direct and indirect services to the South Asian and racialized community. CASA serves its member through advocacy, research, capacity building, training, and development of resources. So as a member agency, most of the CASA members enjoy increased visibility through event and program promotion on CASA's social media, newsletter, and website. Members also gain access to training, funding opportunities, valuable networking, and collaboration support. To learn more about CASA membership, please visit our website, or you can email kurat@casa.ca. I will also put this information in the chat, so feel free to connect with us. And I will pass it back to Naini.
Thanks, Kurit. So our role in terms of this Data for Change project, we're pretty much here to lead the community of practice workshops so that organizations from the community social service sector, such as yourselves, can come together and have open dialogue about what you learned from the previous sessions that were taught by SHIP and logical outcomes, and also address the specific questions, gaps, and needs that you may have with regards to organizational readiness, the data collection process, and how to advance better outcomes for equity deserving communities that you serve. So each community of practice is based on a specific theme. So this one's theme for this community of practice is on plan and build. And we're looking at organizational readiness and the data collection process, which were facilitated by SHIP and logical outcomes this past month. So in this COP session, you'll have the opportunity to learn from these two organizations and from each other of some of the issues you're coming across, and also to provide feedback on how we can further better our community of practice sessions. So each COP will also have a spotlight feature of community leaders who have extensive experience in data equity work. So this COP will have a community leader from the Wellesley Institute who will touch on the data equity work they have done, and we'll be introducing them later on in our fireside chat. Next slide, please. So this is basically basics, but basically basics. So many of you probably already know what a community of practice is, but for those of you who don't, it's basically a group of people who share an interest in a topic, common concern, or a set of problems and want to come together to address them and fulfill both individual and group goals. So this community of practice for the Data for Change project, basically all you folks who are here attending this workshop have a common interest and or concern about organizational readiness and or the data collection process. And you want to share and collectively problem solve together around issues that you may have regarding this for organizational readiness or data collection. So this COP is really a platform for peer-to-peer learning and troubleshooting and gaining some insights and resources that can help guide your organization. So towards the end of this workshop, you'll have SHIP and Logical Outcomes share their assessment and evaluation tools so that you can learn how they have built theirs for their staff and the communities they work with, and also ask any questions that you may have. Next slide, please. Okay, and these are pretty much the three characteristics of a COP: the domain, the community, and the practice. And the domain is where is what I had emphasized earlier on a group of individuals who have an area of shared interests and key issues. And this shared domain creates common ground, which inspires members of the COP to participate, guides their learning, and gives meaning to their actions. So the second characteristic, which is the community, is where relationships are built through discussion, activities, and learning, and which is why we're here in this community of practice. And this notion of community creates a network of collective learning, problem solving, and discussions. The third characteristic is the practice, and it's where the body of knowledge, methods, stories, and tools are developed and then shared with folks outside of the COP, so your respective organizations. So like what you learn from SHIP and Logical Outcomes in their workshops and in this community of practice, you'll then take it back to your organizations and share like some of the assessment tools that they have developed as like a template or a guide for how you may want to create yours or their evaluation plans. I'm going to pass it over to Noor. She's going to ask us a few questions on Menti. So Noor, I'm going to pass it over to you to explain how they can answer those questions. Next slide, please.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, can folks hear me okay?
Yes, Noor.
Perfect. Okay, so the first thing I just want everyone to do is, Kurat, can you also put the link onto the chat? So you can either take out your phone and just scan the QR code that will take you to a Mentimeter poll. And then if you don't have your phone for the QR code, we will send you the link on the chat. So we'll do that. I'll give folks about like a good 30 seconds to have the QR code scanned. And then we'll kind of move forward to a small little exercise. So I'm gonna just hop off the full screen. And just in case folks need the link, I will send that over on our chat. There, so folks, we can kind of hop on. So as people are kind of trickling in, again, with the link or the QR code, we just have a question we want to kind of ask before we kind of dive in with more of the work. So again, as this is kind of like the first community of practice, we really want to know what folks are interested in gaining or learning from these community of practices. So you are allowed to answer multiple, and then you have about 6 options. The first one is being kind of, again, so what would you like to learn from this community of practice? Option 1 is foster collaboration. Number 2 is knowledge exchange. Number 3 is leadership development. Number 4 is tool development. Number 5 is staff buy-in, and then you have other. So for folks who press other, on our next slide is going to be an opportunity for you to write out kind of what other things you are hoping, but we will kind of wait and see what people are adding on this one for now. So obviously you can tell a lot of folks are very interested in knowledge exchange, which I think is, 100% something we want to make sure that that is, being implemented. Tool development is another big one. So what would you like to learn from this community practice, and then hopefully moving forward, other community practices as well? I'll give folks about another 10 seconds to add in their information on this slide, and then we will move on to the next slide. So on your next slide with the same link, for those who put other or have something they want to add on as well. So question 1, if selected other, please briefly mention what other things you hope to learn from this community of practice. So this is an open-ended question, so you can kind of write whatever you feel is also something that you hope to learn or to gain from these community of practices. So you can just swipe on to the next slide of that same link. And we can kind of wait to see people's responses on this. So I'll know people are putting or implementing responses once they start popping up on the screen.
Nor there's a question in the chat. Some
Yeah.
folks are requesting for, can you please give us a little bit more explanation on staff buy-in, what we mean by that?
Yes, can I throw that over to Nayani? Is that possible?
Yeah, what was the question? Okay, wait, let me open up the chat.
Can we get more information in regards to staff buy-in, which was option 5 on the first slide?
Yeah, I guess in terms of staff buy-in, what we mean is like how to get like your staff, your employees to actually support a decision-making process, like something that an idea is thrown out and like, how to support that. Like, how some employees or staff might not be on the same page when it comes to a specific idea, and especially in this type of work that we do with data equity. So that's why we put in staff buy-in for that, one of the last options. I think it was the second last option, right? And we had other?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, can other staff be committed to some of the goals or visions or initiatives that we may have for this data equity work?
So we do see some responses coming in as well. So folks definitely want to see some networking, learning to develop processes and shape culture that can support the use of the tools, interchange knowledge, strategies, tools organizations are using, how to create a data dashboard for multi-sectoral programs in different sections of databases. So that's a really good one, actually.
Yeah, that one, yeah. The dashboard.
And so all these kind of information that folks are putting down, us at Cassa and alongside with the other organizations for these community practices, we put these into consideration so we can always, obviously, as we continue to do these community practices, we kind of know what folks are looking into. So we make sure that when we are having this time that it's benefiting you as well, and the things that you want to learn as well is being considered as well. So I'll give folks another 30 seconds for this one. Again, if selected other, please briefly mention what other things you hope to learn from this community of practice. Cultural diversity and stigma-sensitive information, which has been left out in current data. Very much yes to that one. How to get data, which is challenging to access. Yeah, example from like police services. Oh, that is definitely a big one as well, especially when you are working with organizations that are frontline. A lot of the times you do need access to such information, especially the data being collected, and that may be harder to kind of access when it's through, whether it's the police force or the police services or others. So we got another response. So learn how to raise awareness about the importance of data collection that considers clients' intersectionality so that we can serve them. That is a very, very important one as well, because a lot of the times the information we're getting in regards to the data or the stats, it doesn't always contribute to folks who maybe they identify with multiple different like intersectionalities or kind of towards them. And I think that is definitely something that we need to kind of acknowledge as well. So I'll give about another 10 seconds. Anyone needs to add any final little messages?
I think we have a question. Give me a
Yes. So
second. Give me
also,
a
if there
second.
is a way to have centralized database for community practices that can be used as a resource hub for different research or programs. Oh, that would be really cool, actually. So basically, if I'm understanding this correctly, so taking the opportunity through these community practices and the things that we learn or kind of create like a hub or some sort of resource option so all those who are attending can be able to access the information or the resources beyond just these meetings that we have. Yes. I definitely think like that can definitely be something that we can do. Again, and that's why the reason we want to have these questions and give folks the opportunity to answer, because using this information that people are providing us, we can kind of better understand how to make the best out of these sessions and, beyond just these sessions, what more can we do? So for now, we do have a few other Mentimeters to go through, but that will be later on in the slides. I am going to just go back and take us back to our slides at the moment. And I will pass that back on to Nayani before we kind of
Thank
get
you,
into the
Noor.
next.
So the next one is on values and ground rules for our community of practice session. So not just this one, but all three. I think we have three more. So the first ground rule is brave spaces and building trust. So when it comes to fostering brave spaces and building trust during our workshops, it's essential to create an environment where all you participants feel safe, respected, and empowered to share. While safe spaces focus on avoiding harm, we want these brave spaces to encourage participants to lean into discomfort and vulnerability for personal and collective growth. So building trust really requires openness and vulnerability. When people are willing to share personal experience or challenges, it deepens the connections in this learning process. The next one is respectful dialogue. So we hope that everyone will communicate with care, attentiveness, and acknowledgement of others' dignities. This would include tone, language, body language, and listening skills. And in general, respectful dialogue reduces defensiveness, fosters collaboration, and helps navigate disagreement productively. In terms of maintaining confidentiality, pretty much confidentiality creates a space where people feel safe to be vulnerable. Therefore, breaching confidentiality can damage trust, hurt others, and undermine the integrity of the group. So we hope that what's shared in each of these community of practice workshops will stay in these spaces, especially when it comes to personal stories or opinions shared without explicit permission. So the next ground rule is openness to diverse perspectives. We want to welcome different worldviews, experiences, and ways of thinking, even when they challenge our own. So diverse perspectives can deepen our understanding and lead to more inclusive, informed decisions and solutions. So we expect in our community of practice workshops that participants will be open to learning, unlearning, and relearning new ideas, even if it feels uncomfortable, especially for folks who come from a place of privilege from a place of privilege or power, and recognizing that everyone has a different lived experience, and also being open to asking questions to understand new perspectives is also important, instead of debating or correcting the individual who's sharing something. And the last ground rule that we have noted down here is inclusivity, which really means that our goal is to create a space where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued, regardless of their social identity markers. So inclusion is the active work of making space for all voices, not just inviting people in, but ensuring that they can participate fully and equitably and be their true authentic self. So we're aiming to use accessible language, avoiding jargon, making room for quieter voices, being aware of body language and nonverbal cues that may exclude individuals, and address even microaggressions or unconscious biases when they arise. Next slide, please. And
we'll
we're
be
going to go back to
going-
Menti. Yeah.
Yes, so we'll be going back to Menti just to go through the next question. Again, I will put the link again in case folks need that. So we're gonna head over to slide number 3. So which should be, or question 2, slide number 3. And then you also have the code as well, which I will put on as well in case folks need the code to access the Menti as well.
I've also put the code in the chat.
Yes, I do see some questions that were asked as well. We'll get to that in a sec. So question 2, who is missing from this list? Who else should be included in this collective learning process? So when we're talking about creating these community of practices, and obviously we have a lot of folks with us today, is there anyone missing from the list? And if so, who else should be included in this this collective learning process?
I think, was there a question before this, Noor, on the
Yes.
values? Or...
So we do have, so from Khadija, how can minority groups get their data included in government community of practice?
I think it's best we get our Menti responses, and then can we go back to the
Yes.
questions? Yeah, is that okay? Yeah, let's do that.
Khadija, we'll get back to that in a sec as well.
So there is another slide on the values. Noor, can you go to the next slide? Sorry, it could be. Yeah. So, Noor, you can take over this one. Sorry,
Okay,
they must have been switched around. Yeah.
no worries. Oh, so I think we are going to be doing this one first then, which was question 3.
Yeah.
So what are some ground rules that we should collectively have together as a group moving forward for future COPs, for community of practices? So folks have that link again on the chat, and you have the code here above that you can add on, and we'll start waiting to get some responses.
Sounded, Nayeli, that a lot of your ground rules that you had for the group really resonated with folks. And so maybe we can leave that for as a question we can email out as well. But
Okay,
it
we can
looks
do
like,
that. Yeah. No worries.
just to ensure we have enough time.
Yes. So how about Noor, the next question, I have a slide for that. That was the one on the community of practice participants. So I'll just briefly go over that slide. Do you want to go back to the slide? Yeah, so far, this community of practice is open to executive directors, directors of development, program and project managers, and other nonprofit leaders collecting, storing, and working with social identity data collection. So we also have representatives who attended the previous Data for Change capacity building workshop learning series who are also here attending this workshop as well. So if we go to the Menti question now, and Noor, you can read that question, I think the question was, are there other folks who are missing from the list, right, Noor?
Yes.
Yes, and I'll pass it back to you.
So yes, as of now, as mentioned on the slide, so the COP participants are executive directors, directors of development, program managers, agencies. So when we go back to the question, which is who is missing from this list and who else should be included in this collective learning process. So somebody's added funders, which yes, 100%. And a lot of the times organizations struggle with that because of lack of funding, or if provided funding, it's never more long-term. Usually they're very like short-term funding that isn't supportive through like the long-term work of these agencies and organizations.
Line workers. Yeah.
We have frontline workers, correct.
And I'll just chime in here just to the comment around funders, and it's really great to see that even our folks who are funding partners throughout the multi-year that this initiative has been going on, the representatives are here today. So if folks are wondering, or hoping that our funders are in the room, they're listening, not for the sake of listening, but also the sake of learning with us, alongside us as a sector. So it's really great to see that the relationship and partnership is there as well. So just wanting to highlight that as I'm seeing it's top of mind for folks here as well. So
Thank you so much. So I'll give folks about another 30 seconds to kind of add in anyone else. So allies of the minority group and community representatives, partners in different sectors, including public, lived and living experience voices. I think that's also very important to ensure contribution for those who have lived or living experiences. Just about another 10 seconds if folks want to add any last minute. Okay. Thank you so much for all those who contributed to the Mentimeters and added that information. We will definitely keep note of all the answers. And I'm going to pass it back over to the team.
Thanks, Noor. So we're on the structure and frequency. Yes, okay. So the structure and frequency of the community of practice workshops. So they'll be held on a bi-monthly basis after each of SHIPS and logical outcomes sessions have been held. So the next community of practice will be held, I believe, July. And the first 3 community of practice workshops are held virtually, while the final one will be held in person as like a knowledge sharing event where everyone will be invited to participate, come in person, and also have the opportunity to network. And the location, date, and time of that in-person community of practice workshop will probably be sent out later, closer, I guess, in fall. I'm going to pass it over to Cosel now to introduce our spotlight speaker.
thank you. And this is the fun part. This is where we, thank you everyone for settling in and helping us kind of work through and workshop through what we'd like to collectively see as a community of practice. And what we're hoping is on that bi-monthly basis, and we are coming together, that we're showcasing some of the really great examples out there in the sector. And Jamal is one of our friend and community partner that is joining us this afternoon for the conversation. So just before we bring him on to the screen, I just wanted to share a little bit of his bio, and folks have it in front of you, but really representing the Wellesley Institute this afternoon, as he's been working in the space of healthcare sector, AI, data collection, and framework development, and has really been seen and across the sector in various different capacities. And without reading what's on the screen there, because many of you can do that yourselves, but I just wanted to give him also the opportunity to come on to the stage with me, and maybe the two of us can showcase a little bit of our conversation. We'll go for about 20 minutes, just an informal back and forth of some of his learnings, some of the ways in which data equity has been shaping his career, and how that's been taking place for him. And then we'll open the floor for discussion. After that, we'll bring our two workshop presenters from previous sessions to also do a little bit of a deeper dive. So hold on tight for that. But meanwhile, let's just open the fireside chat and welcome Jamal Demek. Am I saying it correctly? And then we will, share the floor together. So welcome, Jamal.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. My name is Jamal Demuka. I'm a researcher, as Kosal said, from the Wellesley Institute. A lot of my work has centered around the collection, use, and governance of sociodemographic data. As it says on the slide, I'm also currently doing my master's in artificial intelligence and health systems research. So yeah, data, I always say, is my bread and butter, but also taking it from the lens of communities, right? What does it mean now as we try and structurally reorient, what data means to us, right? And how we can drive change. So I've been working a lot with different organizations, a lot within the health sector, whether those are community health centers, hospitals, Ontario health teams, up to Ministry, Ontario Health, High, and across different provinces as well. But maybe what I'll talk a bit about later too is some of the work we've been doing with the City of Toronto in developing a Black community data governance framework, which we did, and now getting into an implementation approach for it. So lots of interesting work that I can probably talk about, but yeah, maybe Kosa, I'll turn it back to you, maybe just to steer us in the right direction.
That's great. And feel free to, you and I are firing back and forth. And so I'm just going to ask for the slides to kind of get dropped for a bit, just so that we can just share our two profiles, and it's a bit more engaging for the audience to see. So thank you so much for providing us a really high level overview of some of your work and touch points in our city, as it's a really critical time for us as we think of as a sector of collecting social identity data, and you're really coming up as a sector expert in that space. Could you perhaps maybe dive a little bit more into just sharing the breadth of your work, both in community and both in health, and then where you're seeing the intersectionality? The past three sessions that we've had are really focused on organizational readiness, and what folks in the audience are looking for and listening for are just what are some of those pieces. And so maybe just setting the tone of the landscape that you've been seeing both in the city and both in the healthcare sector. So that'd be great to start off with.
Yeah, no. So if I were to reflect on some of the first experiences that the organizations were having when trying to collect and use sociodemographic data, is really that part about its use, I think, gets lost along the way to a lot of folks. So it really is about driving the message as to the why, right? Why we're doing this, and that honestly comes in the use, the interpretation, the analysis. Collection doesn't give us any information, alone. We need to understand it as part of a change process, right? A structural modification that we want to do, where we're using data to inform that, right? Having it doesn't change the nature of an organization. So I think it's some of that messaging that's crucial in that organizational readiness phase that really drives action along the way. Some of the things that I often tell organizations too is this idea that if you're to start collecting this, if you're not doing it in this right way, then and you're not doing enough, then we need to stop it there, right? And I think understandably so, in our system, there's this idea that you need to do it, right, but what I try and invite is the thought of doing good instead, because when you're thinking about, doing it right, you're going across, that the principles say that I must do this, but an organization can engage with communities. Actually, if that's the right thing to do, anyone can do that. But when we talk about good, we're talking about the consequences, right? The end of it all. Are there outcomes being, positive outcomes coming out of this process? And so again, that's where does data fit in this process? And so that's where we have to start to think. We need to go back in our organization and build pathways for change. Having data, again, doesn't, you can present to a leadership team and say, these are the pain points. But there's no process to actually do anything with that information. Then again, your data, you won't get value out of it. So again, there's a foundational, reorientation of how we understand data. You can have the same data set, and if a clinician looks into it, they can say, I can use this information to find the best interventions to solve, some heart disease. An insurance company can look at that and say, I can find the most cost-effective way to solve, or to deliver healthcare. Communities, now when we think about bringing communities and all organizations that day to day are working with clients and see the issues, now we can start to think about how we improve lives, right? Do good, because we have that direct interaction of what it means to do good. So the hope is we find, or like my hope is that we find a way to do that, because now once we understand why we're using it, and we have a system as to how we can use it. Now all we have to do with the data is say, okay, what is it telling us? What can we change? Where do we need to change it in the process? If it's a recreational program for youth, are people able to access our forms? Is it an issue there, or is it an issue of quality of the programs. People are coming in and then they're leaving. Or do we want to study how maybe the kind of the lack of transit in the area is actually driving engagement? And we can now identify specific pinpoints and problems to solve with the data. And so again, it's that intentionality, so that once you have it and you understand why, you now input the data into your how process along the way. And so that's what a lot of the work I feel needs to focus on. And that's what I see people doing, right? In the absence of data, you have so much work to do, right?
Yeah.
And maybe before, I'll just cut myself off for right now and let this be an actual conversation. But what I will say is also start small and understand that your first year of data will probably be garbage. And that's not a bad thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Focus on
Yeah.
data quality and you fine tune that process.
Yeah. And scaling is everything. No, I hear you. No, thank you for starting us off in a really great foundational way. And I'm hearing really key words around, like, when we're even before starting data collection, asking that central why, because as we know, the community social services sector we're a sector of doers, right? We go out there, we hit the ground running, we're out there for our people that we serve. But just like the many different institutions that you've mentioned, whether they're insurance, whether they're government, whether they're large, the police, they all collect social identity data for their own points and purposes. So we as a community social services sector have to ask ourselves a fundamental question as to why we're collecting, and you provided really good rationales to do good. And so what that means is, in order to do better for the communities that we serve, we need to know who we serve. So a really outcomes-based kind of conversation as a starting off point. What is our fundamentals? What are our intentionalities? And really carrying these keywords. Could you take us a little bit back to your early days when you were tasked, in partnership with the City of Toronto and Wellesley, to think about the Black data equity strategy and what that means, and what were those early days, and felt like, let's really give a hard example of some of the challenges and considerations and the overlays, and even before having a strategy or a framework, what were some of the challenges for the city that you remember?
Yeah. So if I were to take it back and just quickly contextualize, Wellesley and the Black Health Alliance as well were
That's
both
right.
asked from the city to develop a Black community data governance framework. We did that across, or using information from a lit review, which is on our website. We talked with different divisions within the city. We did focus groups with leaders of Black serving organizations. We also just talked to organizations focused on whether it's food security, community safety, education, housing, health, et cetera, et cetera. We talked with lawyers, tech people, bringing all the voices in, trying to understand, right, how do we bring this all together? I think some of the first challenges that a lot of people have is they already don't have an understanding of what their data governance process is as a whole. Beyond getting into communities, sure, but even in the most institutional understanding of data governance, people are not sure where is this stored. I don't know. Well, who gets access to this data? Well, it was based on a project. And I don't say this in maybe this kind of fun way to make that sound like it's a bad, thing that people are there. Often the way that our roles are constructed lead us to practice things in this way. But I think, there's a lot of foundational pieces that people have around data in terms of knowing what their requirements are in terms of, storage and access rights. Another piece is deciding between, if you were to collect information from another organization, or you want to share it in some way, what are the power relations between them that enable someone to say yes or no? That's something that the city has to think about as a major funder, right? That if you're now asking your organizations to provide race-based data, and if there's not enough of an understanding of what that data means, then that could also cause harm to institutions. One way that someone brought up in a focus group is they're saying, well, our organization, we help a lot of unhoused clients, and a lot of them are Black. The issue is right now, I don't know how many of them will want to provide their race-based data right now based on just structural issues. We can work on that, but I'm afraid in the first 2-3 years, we give that to the city, then it's going to show that we don't have any Black clients, and we don't deserve this funding, and that's going to be taken away from us. But see that, and rightfully so, but that understanding can only happen again if you don't understand the intention behind why the data was collected to begin with, right? What are you actually measuring? What students are being told from it? And so that remains true whether you are on the funder side, but then also when you are on the organization, maybe even providing data too, right? Adding those nuances in a report and being ready to engage in those conversations, I think is a hugely important thing for people to have. And then
That's
maybe
really interesting. Yeah.
one last thing I'll add, because I also did focus groups with community members as a whole,
Yeah.
in their process. One thing I really think it's important to say is that people understand data. I think a lot of the time there's an idea that having a conversation about data with people with no experience in it is going to be challenging. It's going to be hard. Completely false. People at this point in this day and age, at least in this city, most people understand what's going on with data. They have a phone that they use, or there's a computer, or they see a sign. They, even in the funny ways, people talk about ads popping up based on something they talked about. People have ideas, right? And they have thoughts. And there are very easy ways to relate data to, a quote unquote everyday person, because everyone has experience with data at this point. So I think it's again about the intention behind what information are we trying to build with communities about data, right? It's not we're taking, they're going to tell us what data to collect. It's more, okay, well, these are issues. Can data be useful in this way? Maybe, quantitative data can be, maybe not, right? And differentiating that and building that with communities as a conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that's good ground.
I love that intentionality of working to solve a problem of your whatever complex problem that you have with community, to use the data to empower that identifier of change among community members, as instead of a top heavy saying we need data in order to solve the community's problem, but rather having it top-sided up and having that conversation. A lot of the theme sounds like upfront intentionality, right? And a lot of the challenges can be solved by identifying what that means. Wondering for you is, and then we have about 7 minutes left together, just so we can open the floor. Is you're speaking a lot about the challenges, and you're speaking a lot about, some of the stigma that folks have when communicating to the public. What are some of the wins you've seen over your course of time with working with community and working with data? And I think, that the beauty of your example there, people already understand. We sign off consent forms all the time around whether we're banking or whether we're, adding it to a cookie or whatever, on our data platforms and not. It's normal when we have it in our every day in the usage, but what are some other wins in which, when we are working with communities, that we can really own when working around data and collecting social identity data? And I think we'll close with that question. Yeah.
For sure. And what I'll do is I just put a link in the chat to a paper that I usually reference in kind of the more formal presentations I give. But essentially, if I were to talk about what the content is in that. So during the pandemic, Black Health Equity Working Group, which is, a collaboration of different, policy experts, health professionals, community advocates, and such, came together and partnered with Toronto Public Health when they started collecting sociodemographic data, and said, okay, well, what are the best ways that we can, use this data to drive change? So they collected race-based identifiers. And I think a lot of people saw the dashboards that eventually came out. But what they measured was the disparities between Black populations and white populations, amongst other races too. But, Black Health Equity Working Group, so they were very much centered around Black communities. And what they saw is, that there were disparities up to, I think, 9 times the white population in terms of COVID-19 cases, in the summer of 2020. But through that time, they engaged with, a lot of different community organizations. There's also the funding aspect, which I don't want to ignore or say isn't important, right? There's, the resources that were kind of provided to say, okay, we want to address this problem. So then that's when we saw a lot of different, mask drives and, health promotion activities happening. And so that 9 times amount, the disparity, actually went down from August till December of 2020. I think to as low as maybe 2 times. So from 9 times to 2 times. And that was happening at the same time that, if you remember, in the fall of 2020, there's actually a big second wave that happened, right? So there's actually more total COVID-19 cases that are happening as a whole, but the disparities continue to drop because there is that intention behind, okay, well, we're using this data to actually just, and that at that point to demonstrate that there is a problem, because they knew once they demonstrated that there was a problem, they would be given the kind of agency to address it in the way that they needed, because they had the open resources. We all, COVID obviously opened a lot of doors that maybe might be more difficult now, but that use of data in that way drove change, and we see that in the numbers, right? And that's what the story tells us. And so that's part of the why, right? Is what we're trying to do. And so I think that's a great example that I always try and refer to when I'm giving presentations. And the paper, I linked it in the chat, so feel free to look and read it yourself so that you can use it as you go forward and remind yourself that this can be done, right?
Yeah. And it can be done in a way that is fast, responsive, and really, really timely. I think when we often think of research and we also think of data, there's a methodic, slow process. But given the willpower of the community, given the way community social services does the work, how can we all do it so that it's timely and responsive to the urgent needs that we're seeing in community? And I think COVID really highlighted for us, like you say, and in the pace of time that all this data was being collected, the community started to rally, have a really quick response, have it targeted strategies out in communities, and we were able to convene really quickly, and the power of data helped force that and drive that forward. So thank you so much. I just have two minutes with you left before I open the floor. Top 3 takeaways you want people to really think about here as we close out our conversation. Everyone's really in the forefront of data collection in their agency. Top of mind for them, really want to do this and do it well. I think you've mentioned the intentionality. You've mentioned, the central why. What are the top 3 things you want folks to take away from today of your own learning?
Maybe again to maybe repeat one that I quickly mentioned, but I want to bring back is, again, start with a single idea or a single area or a single issue. Don't believe that having data is going to make your organization the most efficient, the most perfect, that's not what it brings, right? You use it to drive, change. And so if you start with a problem and address that problem, you're slowly starting to create the processes to address those problems too in the background, so that the next time that you want to address a problem with data, you have a bit of readiness there, right? So it's not an either or, that we can do this or we can't. It's growing a tree, right? You can't just get a big oak in your backyard. You got to watch it grow. So keep that, in mind. Maybe another thing I'd say is start to think about what to do when unexpected results happened, or maybe something that you don't like, or something, having those communication strategies to and readiness to say, like, we said that we would do this, but it didn't work in this timeline. I know that there's one public health unit who works with communities that kind of has an advisory committee, and they said that really helps people stay engaged too, right? You're going to lose people the more that you hold yourself and say, us as an institution, we said we committed to equity and driving change, but then we didn't, but now it feels off. Well, it's a lot better to be honest about the process, because that's actually changing how your organization works, right? That transparency piece. And again, now data enters that. If data enters that environment, then again, you're opening it up to drive some more change. Maybe a last one, because I didn't touch on it, but I want to make sure that it gets highlighted in some ways. The resources is incredibly important. If you don't have those together, right, then it's really hard to think about long-term support. But it still ties back to what I was saying about start with a single issue. You're going to need a lot of resources if you're trying to solve, a major issue, a major crisis. If you're trying to address a specific pain point of an organization, perhaps you can find some funding, perhaps you can find a collaborative partner who focuses on that issue, is willing to spend some time with you on that. And in that way, again, you create those incremental changes. But yeah, and so in that resourcing is, again, think beyond equity teams as being the only ones who work on data. Everyone in an organization works at that same organization. So they're going to have insights as to what to do with that data as you go along the way. So whether you're a clinician or a data scientist or a social worker or, a manager of a program, immigration, all these voices matter in terms of driving change. So I don't limit yourself to thinking that I don't have a great understanding of data again, so I can't do anything with this project. You can.
I love that. I love this community approach. I love the tree approach, and I love the growth approach. And so you're leaving us with lots of food for thought, and just really making that data is not scary. It's really attainable if you just manage the scope and manage expectations and have a good comp strategy. Thank you so much. So I'll open the floor now. I see lots of great comments coming through, folks loving the oak analogy as well. But I'll start with we only have 5 minutes for this. So if folks have questions, we can also follow up as well with other questions, and we'll provide an email that you can also connect direct personal questions to Jamal. But how can we, first question here is, how can a multi-program structured complex organization strategically prioritize and curate data for inclusion in a publicly accessible dashboard? So that's the piece where, don't be fearing data, right? And how do we just embrace the data public, and how do we engage communities in a really complex way? So I hope I'm getting, and feel free to unmute. Fraser, if you are feeling this question isn't coming through the way you're hoping. So, but I'll let you try to answer it, Jamal, first. How can a complex organization start to have publicly accessible dashboard data to share with the community they serve?
Yeah, no, with the context that I do have, maybe I'll answer the best I can. But even in the framing, I'm seeing it's a multi-program, it's that structurally complex organization trying to curate one dashboard or a dashboard, publicly accessible. It will be impossible to try and think through a dashboard that serves the needs or feeds into all these different programs and complex things. I think we need to, again, rethink about what is the purpose of that dashboard. Is it to provide people with information? Is it for people to interact with and maybe collect that information and go on and use it themselves? Is it an open data portal? Is it a way of engagement? So depending on the use of that dashboard, right, is then how we work backwards to ask which programs should this feed into? Like, is there a specific, whether it's, let's say, community, violence in certain communities, is that what we're trying to explore? Maybe we'll need things from our youth department, we'll need things from our policing unit. There's lots of information that'll come together. But again, are we trying to just show people what's going on? Are we trying to give people information so that they can, perhaps find problems that we didn't already? So again, it's about taking that step back and documenting, again, what the aims are first. And again, maybe that there is an answer for that already and I just don't have it. But there's also, I will say on a second part is there's lots of work out there on human-centered design. So it's about rethinking how we get to a final end stage. And so we need to start from the part of where we have, we know that there's a problem, but then now we identify what are all the different people involved that have issues. So, we need to I recognize that employees are also people too. So, they're trying to do their job. They have their frustration points. There's things going on. There's the clients who have their own issues in providing data and everything. There's the analysts. Everyone has their problems. So then now we collapse that and we come together. What is one single way that we can address this? And maybe that is a dashboard, right? And if that's a dashboard, we collapse and said, okay, well, it needs to solve these pain points. Then we can move forward in the design point, right? Once we've done all that exploration. And so that's kind of what human-centered design talks to. And I'm happy to maybe go into that another time, but yeah.
That's great. That's great. There we go. There we go. Thank you. So some food for thought, some takeaway on your publicly accessible dashboard. If anyone else in the room has a question, they're more than welcome to unmute or put your hands up, and then we can make sure you get a question in. But we have about 2 minutes left, Jamal, before we move on to our next session.
Coastal, we have a question in the chat, and it's how can minority groups get their data included in government community practice?
So I think that was further up earlier in the chat. That was asking how do minority groups get or see their data in larger institutions such as government data or other data. So how do we advocate for that, and how do we access that? That's more the question, I think. Any experience on your end of how to navigate that?
No, there's too much to talk to in 2 minutes, but is really the issue. There's, I think if I have 1 minute, what I will try and focus on is say, what does access necessarily mean? It would be great, and we should advocate and work towards getting to a place where we can provide access to data to community members and community organizations. That the raw data work back and forth, perhaps, but we know that we're challenged in those ways. If I go back even maybe to connect it to the dashboard example, though, that's a great way of an accessible way that we can provide access to data to community members, or as we talk minority groups in this question. But in terms of, okay, if people come and say they have a question, have a built-in process to get that data visualized in graphs and charts and maps and whatever way possible, and bring that data back to folks. And in that way, you're giving people information. And really, that's what data is meant to do, right? Is to generate and provide information. So as long as we, in the ways that we can, right, have that exchange of information, you want to know more about this based on our data. This is the information we have. What are your thoughts? And we have that back and forth dialogue. That's, a beginning to talking about access to data. But yeah, there's.
Yeah. And I also want to offer, there's also complementary data, right? So if the police has their data, community social services has their data, and you begin to overlay data. So it's not just one superior data over the other end. So how do we begin to have that, those types of platforms equal to some of the institutions that we are seeing or want access to? So just wanting to offer that as well as you were somewhat alluding to as well. And I'll think the final question here is from Eva, just to how to resolve the dichotomy between quantitative and qualitative information. So hopefully you can, maybe have a quick answer to that, because it sounds like a more of a complex question.
Yeah, it is complex. Maybe, it's hard to try and say something fast. The beginning, I won't talk about the book a lot right now, but I was reading about the history of statistics actually the other day, and it was, one thing that I saw is a large part of the movement of statistics came from the urbanization of Europe. And so then there is the need, then as you have large, groups of people, you need to now go back and say, okay, well, how do we have information about lots of people? Because we used to have a town where I can just go door to door and ask what's going on, and then, go. But then now all of a sudden, right, you have swaths of people. And so then that's how you then need data in, under this paradigm. The problem is now that, as we think about it, and as I try and come back to the intention around data, as I mentioned, it will give you a single piece of information, or, maybe 2 pieces, 3 pieces of information. It does not tell you about how to act on that information, how to act on that data. That's where the qualitative piece comes in, is right, the structural change, the institute, and identifying even the problems to begin with. So quantitative is like almost even, if we think about change, that's, I feel, quantitative thing. I don't talk numbers to my colleagues, right, every day. If I don't, do that, what I do is I have conversations, focus groups, ideas. I'm in leadership meetings and we discuss things, and then that's how information gets passed. Quantitative information gets integrated into that process. So it's about identifying how to integrate it in. So I don't see it as an either or anything. It's all part of this ecosystem, all part of this environment. It's just, again, picturing it in the right way so that we move forward.
That's a great way to close out. And I think folks are curious about the book that you were referring to. So if you want to put that there, that would be great in the chat. Data is complex, data is messy, but it's accessible and it's quite manageable if we open ourselves up to the central why as why we're collecting. And so Jamal, thank you so much this afternoon for just bringing us there, showing us some of the ways in which you've had challenges with data, have hope for data, and review data. So thank you so much. And will just close out our session for the community practice. Our first session, that was great. I thought it went back and forth for a bit. And I'm going to hand it back over to our CASA partners to bring us back to two of our other sessions that we've had and just do more technical pieces around the conversation. So back to you, Nayani.
Thank you, Kosel. Just to clarify, are we doing our break right now, or would you like to move into SHIP and logical outcomes 2 sessions on their assessment tool and evaluation plan?
If we can get just a hands up from folks or fingers or thumbs up from folks, are folks okay to continue
would
to
help.
move, or do folks just want like a 5-minute break? We do know this is a long session. We're okay. Okay,
Fine with
5-minute break, please.
Oh,
Okay. All right. So why don't we just put a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back really soon. And then Sophie and Nicole will come back to us as they're looking for some breaks. So hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you guys. Just to allow us to make the switch. All right, Diane. You okay? You got it?
Yeah, I got in. My Zoom kicked me out.
Oh,
I had to get another laptop. So is everyone back from break? Can we start?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Noor, can you switch the slides, please? Yes. Okay. So for those of you who did attend last month's workshop that SHIP had facilitated, you pretty much would know what SHIP covered, what topics SHIP covered. But for those of you who haven't, I'm just going to briefly go over what was discussed. So SHIP facilitated their workshop on how to lay the foundations and implement equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and justice principles and practices within your organization. And they also spoke about the history of data collection that has had a detrimental effect on equity deserving communities, specifically Black and Indigenous communities in both Canada and the US, and why there has been a historical mistrust towards giving specific data about themselves when folks are doing data collection work. So I'm going to pass it over to either Shireen or Nicole to go over their equity assessment tool. Shireen or Nicole, I'll pass it over to you to speak for the next 15 minutes about your tool, and then we'll give 5 minutes for the audience to ask any questions through the chat.
Thanks
Sure.
so much.
I think Nicole's going to bring up some a slide or
Okay,
Yeah, I
Cool.
just need permission to
you
share
need
now.
permission? Okay, Noor, can you give Nicole co-host permission?
There we go. I got it now.
So maybe I'll
So
just
thank
note
you.
while Nicole is bringing that up, if you see my background, just to note that this week is National Accessibility Week. And so just because I think it's appropriate around collecting data around accessibility in your organization, that's another way in which data can be very useful and beneficial for change management in an organization. So I thought I'd just do that plug as well for everyone. Okay, so I'll let Nicole introduce herself and then I'll introduce myself.
And I was just updating my background too. Thank you so much, Shireen. And thank you everyone for having the opportunity to be here again. My name is Nicola Briscato. I go by pronouns she, her, and I'm the manager of Central Intake and Access Services and Housing in the province. I've been with the organization for about 17 years now. Shireen just a little bit more than me. So we have a lot of history within the organization, but so glad to be here. Shireen will be taking the lead with this conversation. I'll just be sharing my screen. I just want to make sure it's showing okay.
Yeah.
And I'll make it a little bit larger for
Yeah,
folks
that would
as
be great.
well. And you let me know when to slide on down. So
Sure.
thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. I'm Shireen Ramprasad. Pronouns are she, her. I'm the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Manager at SHIP. I have been with the organization just a little over a year longer than Nicole, for about 18 years now, in various different roles. But in this most recent role of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Manager, one of the things that I'm responsible for and take very seriously and take a lot of pride in is ensuring that our organization has the tools that we need to build equity into our practices, our policies, our processes. And so one of the things that we talked about very briefly, one of the tools that we introduced at our presentation, our workshop in April, was what we call the equity assessment tool for policies and procedures. And so our discussion was really about organizational readiness. How do you plan to be ready to not just collect sociodemographic data, but do it in an equitable manner? And how do you set the foundation pieces that you need in order to know how to do that? So one of the tools that we use, and I think we said in our workshop as well, just to remind folks that we're not experts at SHIP. We don't come from a place, we're not consultants, we're not experts. I'm not a data analyst by any means, but just going back to what Jamal said, data is really everyone's tool. We all have a part to play in how data is used equitably within your organization. So having said that, this is where we come at it from, is that place of experience where we have adopted that idea that we are all responsible for the data that our organization collects, and we're all responsible for ensuring that it is used to not just improve our programs, but used to equitably improve our programs for everyone. So having said that, this tool we call our equity assessment tool, and it is an internal tool that we developed internally with our EDI committee and other members of our staff, as well as client input. So I think it goes back to what Jamal was talking about that human-centered approach. This tool provides you an opportunity to be able to do that. It is an equity assessment tool in the sense that it helps you to self-assess, to assess a program, a policy, a process. You can even use it to assess yourselves as an organization across your organizations. And that's how we use it. All of our policies, procedures, program development, we use this tool in order to assess whether or not we are building equity into our process and into the process of actually planning things. We use this tool as well. So you'll see here that we have our commitment statement at the top to remind everybody of the why. Why are we even using this tool? Why as an organization have we committed to building equity into everything that we do? And so the first step, and the tool will it takes you through a series of steps to ensure that you are, going through a process together. The first step is identifying the people that are most impacted by the policy, the process, or the procedure that you are reviewing or looking at. And so we have this list here around the people that can be impacted by your process. And so we've identified some areas, but we've also have a section here for other. And through our process of creating this tool, we consulted with diverse representation from across our organization, like I said. So they all had some input into this chart, but also into all of the steps that we've identified. So when we look at things like age, race, indigenous ancestry, nationality, disability, creed beliefs, sexual orientation, linguistic origin, gender identity, socioeconomic status, family status, body image, and then there's a section for other. If we've missed something, we want the opportunity for whatever group you're bringing together to create the policy or process to be able to add what other folks would be impacted by what they're creating. And then you'll see it says, how may these persons be impacted, positively or negatively? Because I think it's important that we not just look at overall impact, that we look at how people are impacted. And there is positive impacts for the most part with many of our policies and processes. They're intended to be positive. They're intended to provide space for people's rights to be shown and to be things that people can follow that will benefit them. But we all know that that doesn't always happen, and that sometimes our policies are missing things because they weren't created by people for people. They're usually created for an organization by leadership or by policy reviewers or by folks that might not have their eye on the pulse of the organization and of all underrepresented groups. So this just helps you to set the foundation by effectively saying, who are you missing at the table while you're creating this policy? You can go down, Nicole. So that's step one. And once you've gone through that process, and the other thing I recommend and what we use the tool for is that no policy, process, program, or anything can be created by one group of people. It should never be just one group of people that is responsible entirely from it. So, and you'll see as we go down, it identifies that as something for you to consider as well. So step two is to describe the potential negative impacts on the identified persons that this policy or process may have. And that requires talking to a few different people. It's not from your opinion. And that's what I think is important with this tool. It isn't opinion-based. It is where you have to seek consultation from the folks that you're talking about, from the people that are impacted. So you want to actively engage people to determine what the negative impacts potentially may be. So we give some examples: change in job performance, impact on social or professional networks. So those are specific to policy development for staff, but certainly the tool can be adapted to be able to do it for program development, let's say for clients, or even we can use it for group development. If we're developing a group for clients, you can use it because these questions are important in that regard as well. You can go down, Nicole. So step 3, what have you done to assess the potential impacts? So it's one thing to be able to say that you have identified impacts that are potentially negative for certain populations or certain groups. But what have you done to assess that potential impact? And that goes back to what I was saying around conducting consultations, talking to the people who are impacted, reviewing your complaints, your concerns history, if you have them, conductive qualitative and quantitative research, doing comparative analysis with other systems, looking at other biases or current barriers that exist within your services already that you might have been able to identify. You might want to conduct a literature review if it is something that has some literature behind it. We look at assessments that we already do or feedback surveys that you have for staff or for clients. So this step really just ensures that you are being informed. When we talk about, and a lot of us talk about using an equity lens when we do things, and I'm sure you've all heard, and probably said it yourself, we're going to look at this through an equity lens. But what does that actually mean? An equity lens means nothing if you don't have some action behind it. We all have different lenses that we look through. So how do you actually act on that equity lens is the question. And this tool helps you to put some steps in place to actually actively use an equity lens and then be able to show how you've used that equity lens to be able to inform the process that you're looking at. So it can go down. Step 4 in the tool is areas to assess. And so it gives you some considerations. And like I said, an equity lens, we give you a bit of some things to consider. And then what are the outcomes that you're expecting and what are the outcomes that you may have identified already? Areas to assess also include inclusivity in the scope. Who's the policy or process designed for? Does it include all those whom it impacts based on the identified persons in step 1? Legislation, there's certainly a lot of legislation that has an impact on our ability to create policies and procedures that are equitable. And so we want to make sure that we're taking that into consideration as well. And then use of language, really important. When we're creating policies and procedures that are inclusive, we want to make sure that we're using language and that our use of language is informed by the people that it represents. So I can't stress that enough. There's language is changing all the time. Our use of language changes all the time. And so often I hear from people and people ask me questions at work, what's the correct term? So you ask the people that it represents what they prefer to be called or how they prefer to be identified. I don't know the correct term for everything. None of us do. But if we ask questions, then we know how people prefer to be identified. Can you please scroll up a bit? Sure. I think we're going to make this available once the website is up. So you'll be able to have an access. I'm going to make it just a template that you can use. I'm going to take off all the SHIP branding. So you'll be able to have access to just a template that you can adopt yourself. And certainly you can change this. And I would recommend that you standardize it and change it and adapt it to your organizational needs. We created it within our organization. The people in our organization created this tool for ourselves. So I would say that you use it as a foundation to create a tool that works for your organization as well. Okay. And then the last part, if we scroll down a little bit in this section, is values. And so we're a values-based organization. We pride ourselves in our ability to ensure that our values are the foundation of everything that we do and all of the policies that we create and services that we provide. So we wanted to ensure that folks are thinking about that when they're looking at policies, programs, even groups for clients. Do they reflect our values as an organization? And do they also reflect our commitment to EDI within the organization? Can go down. And then step 5 is, what changes or recommendations are you making to mitigate against the potential negative impacts of the policy? What changes or recommendations are you making to enhance the positive impacts of the policy? So you may see that I use intentional language here. We're looking at impact, not intention, and it's on purpose. It's very easy for us to say that our intention is good. We have good intentions when we create policies, when we create processes or services. But if you don't look at impact, those intentions mean nothing. If the impact is negative, your intentions mean nothing to the people that are being impacted. So you want to bring everybody back in this tool to what the impact is and how are you going to mitigate those impacts. And so if it's applicable, you want to consult and get advice from the appropriate staff or professional consults to determine any equity recommendations to mitigate those impacts. And so we just have a list here of folks within our organization that people could be able to go to consult, to get some advice, to have discussions and conversations about that as well. I think we go down. And then the last part of the tool we just included is a glossary of terms. And these are just some definitions, just to remind folks of what these definitions mean. And these are things that we should always be considering whenever we're looking at using, at building equity into our processes. So we just wanted that to be available for folks. And I think that's it. Yes.
There was a question in the chat from Sophie. So Shireen, you can speak to it as well, but I wanted to highlight, we've used this tool at Central and taken access, for example, on our different processes that we have, for example, placing files on hold. So we went through the assessment, this assessment, the equity assessment tool together as a group, then brought it to the EDI committee, brought it to our client and family program advisory, brought it through our ethics review committee as well, showcasing how originally we came together as the Central Intake team, identified to see if our policy was following what we wanted it to be in alignment with the equity policy and the assessment. So this has been really useful to have a overview lens and making sure that we're getting everyone at the table and everyone's voices are heard, especially with the client and family program advisory, as again, as Shireen has mentioned and others today, nothing about me without me. So making sure that they're at the table. We have also used it with our infection prevention and control policy. I co-chair that committee as well at the organization, wear many different hats. But with that, we looked at it from a way to ensure that we were utilizing our procurement process in a way that was equitable. So not all soaps are going to be as effective for all different skin conditions or types. So we wanted to make sure we ran the equity assessment tool through our policy of procurement to make sure that we were doing it from an equity lens. And sometimes the hand soap dispensers weren't necessarily catching everyone waving it for it to come and dispense the soap. So then we utilized our procurement process to get something that everyone could utilize. So I think it's something that we can use in very different aspects, not only policies, but infection prevention control in any way so that we can, again, come from that equity lens.
We also have used it, we use it at SHIP on every policy that comes up for review. It is embedded in our policy that the tool must be used, and that it must go through the various different groups that are representative of the organization. So when we do a policy review, we use the tool first at EDI, at our EDI committee, because our EDI committee is also very diverse intentionally. We've intentionally recruited diversity, but it also has representation from clients and families of the organization who sit at the committee as equal members. So they have, you know, through their work with the committee and using this tool, they're able to put that lens on it as well, on all our policies, even our policies that are strictly internal, that are staff, that are about staff and about internal policies at SHIP. Those are all driven through the EDI committee using this tool initially. And like Nicole said, then the process drives itself. Once we use this tool, the EDI committee can make some recommendations of who else should be reviewing that process or that policy or that group in order to have that diverse representation. So that's it. Are there any other questions? I don't know if we're out of time. I wasn't even looking at the clock.
I think we have 20 minutes for logical outcomes, but Shireen and Nicole, thank you for going over your equity assessment tool. Does anyone have any questions? Last minute questions, maybe 1 minute? We were supposed to have 5 for you both, but yeah.
I'm just scrolling up to
Okay.
make sure we haven't missed anything, but I think on that end, I'm not sure if anything was sent directly to anyone. But again, if there's any questions, there's that email through Find Help 211 Toronto. Please don't hesitate to ask after this session, and we'll be more than happy to support with a response.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna briefly go over what logical outcomes spoke about last week for their workshop. So they were touching on the practices for collecting, analyzing, and sharing social identity data while ensuring that it follows appropriate data policies and procedures. So logical outcomes also emphasize the importance of engaging with the community that you serve so that they are part of both the project planning, data collection, and analysis process. I'm going to pass it over to Sophie and Meda to go over their evaluation planning tool, and also I think they were going to talk about their free AI workspace. So Sophie, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Naini. Medha, I think we need to be able to share our screen.
Yes, Noor, can you give co-host access to Sophie?
To Medha?
Oh, Meda, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Kosal and Naini, should we introduce ourselves, or can we assume that folks who are in the community of practice probably attended the workshop previously?
I think you can do a brief introduction.
Okay, let's do a brief introduction. So my name's Sophie Llewellyn. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Director of Evaluation with Logical Outcomes. And Logical Outcomes is, we're a nonprofit. We're an evaluation firm. We have a mission to build organizational learning and evaluation capacity. And we tend to do that through evaluations, through building evaluation and data systems, through different kinds of data work and training and events like today, I suppose, and tools. Medha?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Medha. I work at Logical Outcomes as a research and evaluation analyst, working closely, like Sophie said, for all the work that we do. Yes, let's begin.
Okay, so today we wanted to share a tool that we actually didn't discuss in the workshop that we offered last week. It's an evaluation planning tool that uses AI. So we've created an AI application that allows a program manager, on the basis of very little information, to develop a draft evaluation plan that has a full set of evaluation questions, a logic model, and a full work plan that aims to support the program manager to run this evaluation. It's a wonderful tool, and it broke right before this presentation. So just a minor glitch, but and it's something that our development team is working on right now. But it's the law of demonstrations. This kind of thing happens right when you're about to demonstrate your tool. You always run into some issue or other. So we decided that we're not going to demonstrate that tool today. And instead, we want to just share some news about a new AI workspace that we're offering for nonprofits that are active in Ontario. So I think it'll be relevant to folks on this call. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we're moving away in what we're offering, and what we're going to discuss right now. It's not directly related to the topic of social identity data collection and use for equity.
Yes, we did speak about in our last workshop how AI is really helpful for when you're also trying to do some planning processes for. Can you hear me okay? Or am I-
Not well, Meda. No. Can you speak a bit
Oh,
more
where's my
loudly?
Zoom? Yes, sorry. I was saying, just to add to what Sophie said, we also mentioned last time, as you're planning your data processes, how you're, especially when it comes to designing your data governance policy, all of those different standards that you have to look at policies, AI is a tool that you can use to help you in the process. So for that as well, this tool can be helpful. But yeah, so we won't take too long, and I'm just going to share my screen.
So we're going to tell you about this new AI workspace, but I also would love to talk data collection, data analysis, data use, data equity. So we could use some time toward the end of the community of practice to just open up the floor for questions and discussion.
Can you see my screen, Sophie?
Yeah, I can. Okay, I'll take it from here. So, this is a brand new project for Logical Outcomes. We received some funding from Ontario Trillium Foundation recently to continue the work that we've been doing around, particularly around co-design of AI applications with nonprofits. We've had some really great experiences doing that, including and also developing our own applications like the evaluation planner in the past. And so this project started a couple of months ago, and the first thing we decided to do was to set up a free AI workspace that can be accessed and used by staff and volunteers with nonprofits who deliver services directly to communities in Ontario. Meda and I have taken part in lots of, well, communities of practice, I would say, around AI in the nonprofit space over the last year or so. And one thing that we've heard again and again is that a lot of nonprofits they're not sure, the field of AI is changing so fast. Everybody is trying to keep up with it. Everybody feels overwhelmed by the pace of change. And nonprofits are struggling to come up with policies and principles and choose technologies for their staff and volunteers as well. And so what's happening is there's sort of a shadow IT emerging at many organizations where staff say, well, we know that AI is really useful, and our organization is not giving us any clear guidance around how to use it, and so we're just going to sign up for ChatGPT and start using it on the side of our desks. And so we wanted to offer a secure space where you have access to high quality AI or LLMs, large language models, high quality AI, and it's free, so nonprofit staff are able to sign up for it and get access to this technology. And so the way to do that is, and so we're actually just soft launching it right now, is what I want to say. It's quite exciting. The way to do that is to come to our website. Maybe I don't have our URL handy. I'll just drop it in the chat
put it in
once
the
we're done
chat.
our presentation, and fill in this interest form. Within about 30 minutes or so, you'll receive an automated email that will give you access to a web page with instructions to create an account, and you can get started in the workspace. And right now we have 2 AI agents in the workspace. Both of them have been prompted so that pre-prompted so that they are useful for nonprofits. And one of them is a quick agent that uses ChatGPT.
I can show us for
You can tell us.
Pelham.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe we look at the workspace real quick.
sure.
I think everyone who's used ChatGPT or Claude, Sonnet, or any of these popular LLMs would be familiar with this sort of interface. So, like Sophie said, we have two chats available, two assistants available that we've pre-prompted, so they're useful for nonprofits. They both use different large language models, and we plan to keep updating this and the prompts based on the feedback that we hear and as different developments take place. But yeah, it's a familiar interface for most people. I would think this is where you would start your chat. You would see all of your chat history on the left, and very standard ways of working, but it's definitely, we think, really useful. We've also built prompts within this that we think are helpful for nonprofits to use. So we've pre-built like a set of whole prompts that we think would be helpful for nonprofits to use. So yeah, we're excited to share this with everybody, and we hope you use it, and we hope you give us your feedback.
We have a question about security. And before we answer that question, Maida, I'll turn to you to answer that question. But what I want to make really clear is that this is not a space where one can upload personally identifiable information and analyze it. So we're really clear in the terms and conditions for use for this site, and we try to remind people in as many places as we can that we do not, well, we actually would like to, we would prohibit the upload of sensitive information or personally identifiable information. That's not something that we can actually do. Instead, we want to build capacity around how to use these tools. And so, yeah, we have an FAQ page that you can use. This will answer questions around security. And I would say, we would never upload sensitive information to an LLM of this kind. We wouldn't share personally identifiable information. It's critical if you're doing any kind of data analysis that you strip any identifiers from your data set before you upload it to an LLM of this kind or another. So I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. I think it would be great, just in the interest of time, we're gonna drop this in the chat as well, because we know that, often with AI, reading through the privacy policy is so confusing. There's so much jargon and you don't really understand what's happening. So I think we've tried to keep this really simple. And it would be helpful to, it talks about the platform we use, where we host the platform, uh, what kind of permissions we've made available, what kind of things, like Sophie said, what we recommend, the best practices for using the platform. So it's, all of this is over here. So I think that would be a great place to start. And of course, if you still have questions, you can always reach out to us. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about, Sophie? I'm just looking at time.
We could talk a little bit about the co-design process that we're hoping to launch in the coming months, whereby in a few months from now, we're still putting together our timeline. We're expecting to launch an application process whereby nonprofits can apply to go through a co-design process with our team to develop applications, AI-based applications that meet their specific needs. So that's something that we're really looking forward to doing, and I'm sure that once we launch that, we will let folks in this community of practice know about that opportunity.
Awesome. Okay, great. Gonna put this in the chat.
Thanks, SHIP and Logical Outcomes, for presenting and sharing your tools with us. It was very informative, and hope participants from today's community of practice will take a look in this. SHIP and Logical Outcomes have put the link in the chat as well. So can we have the next slide, please, Anur? Slide number 27. Thanks, Noor. So participants, we really value your feedback. Please take a moment to scan the QR code and complete our short feedback survey. Your insights help us improve our future workshops and better serve our communities. So we will give just 1 minute to this slide. Please take a moment to complete this. And just keeping that in mind that we are above our time. So thank you for your time and support. And we'll move to our next slide. That's the resource hub. And I'm really excited for this. I will pass it over to Kosel to please share this resource hub, the Data for Change website with us.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen for a second here. And this is the long-awaited website. Then we're just going to launch it on Friday for everybody. We're just waiting for our final senior leadership approval. But wanting to give people just a preview on what's to come. And many of you have been asking for apologies. It's just after school. Hold on for one. I'm so sorry, everybody. So this website is here really for the sector to use as a tool and as a resource, and what folks have been asking for, which is the Data for Change Knowledge Hub. Here is where we are going to share with you and ask you all to join us. We know that you've been registering through the community. You've been joining us through the Zoom links and whatnot, but we're just asking folks as you read through this to think about joining us as a collective of folks across the sector collecting social identity data. And if you're interested, you can sign up and we'll put you on an email list. And as things come up, pop up, opportunities, resources, we'll get that to you as well, just so that there's an online community that we can continue on to engage you all with the sector. This website will be very simple, and it's really for us to continue to evolve and to add to as this group grows. We're looking to share a little bit of our history. If you've joined us before, you know that this isn't the first year that we've developed this. It's been started since 2020, and then it's evolved over time. And there's been tools and resources and reports. So we'll look to share that with you, just so that everyone has a bit of a background as to where we're coming from and kind of the small scale that we've been working on over the years as we continue to evolve into a much larger community of practice that you're a part of today. There is a bit of a preamble just around what is data equity and why it's important, just so that you are anchoring yourself when you're visiting the site. And hopefully, again, we can continue to evolve this together as we can continue to bring this together as a group. So feel free to have a read and a little bit of what we mean by social identity data and what those points are. Throughout the whole website, you'll see us as partners, as if you're ever looking for us, trying to figure out who we are, what our names are, what our websites are. When you link to all of these logos, it takes you to our sites. And then, of course, we have our sponsors down there. What will be key is what many of you are asking for is the capacity building learning series. And so we'll be continuing to put on all of our upcoming resources and supports for you. But every time a session is coming up, and our team is just in the process of finalizing this, is we'll put in the links of the video that was watched and also the PowerPoint that was presented. So those will always be linked if it's there. And then, of course, you can also register. So this is an evolving website, the community of practice, the page that we want to build together. We're going to put that under construction until we get a bit more feedback, and some of the feedback that you provided today will be posted onto the website just around the group, who's the group, who's part of the group, who are part of the partnership tables and whatnot. And then, of course, the ongoing breadth of the tools and resources that we're going to be collecting over the course of the year. We'll be having a dedicated line for that. But right now, that will also be under construction. So We just ask for your patience, but I know I've mentioned it a few times, and it's not an elusive thing. It is something that we're developing. We're just waiting for final sign off from our senior leadership team. But this page will be for the community. It will be developed with us, all of us together, and hopefully that it lands for you. And we'll hope to share the link by Friday if you have it in your inbox. But this is where you're going to get the PowerPoints, you're going to get the resources, you're going to get the tools, and you'll get a central space of where we'll be continuing to hover together. So I hope that works. And back to you,
Thanks.
Nayan. Thank you for giving me the space to do that.
Thanks, Kosel. And next slide, please. That's the last slide. And so we are pleased to announce the successful completion of our first stage of the Data for Change project, that's plan and build. The project now moves into its second stage, that's collect and store, which will include an organizational change management workshop that will be led by SHIP next month, that's June. I really want to thank you for dedicating your time to attend our recent workshops, and we look forward to your participation in our upcoming sessions. Wishing you a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone.